Could the Samsung Galaxy S8 be the biggest smartphone of 2017? Well, after Samsung's recent press conference announcing it, that could turn out to be true. It has some very interesting new features as well as some that are a bit questionable. So I thought we could go over the most significant stuff that you guys might want to know about and my thoughts as well. So let's get to it. First of all, Samsung actually announced two versions of their new flagship, the S8 and the S8 Plus. Totally didn't copy that from Apple, but it's pretty much the same. Last year they had the S7 and S7 Edge. So as you'd expect, the S8 Plus is physically larger and has some slightly better specs, but for the most part they're almost the same. Probably the biggest feature on the whole phone is the screen, which they're calling the Infinity Display. And like the previous Edge phones, it kind of wraps the screen around all the way to the edges, so there's basically no side bezel at all. And the top and bottom bezels are tiny as well, meaning that almost the entire front of the phone is just screen. Both screens have a resolution of 2960 by 1440, so it's a bit wider aspect ratio, with the S8 being a 5.8-inch display and the S8 Plus at 6.2 inches. Those screen sizes sound huge, and they are for phones, but the actual bodies of the phone are just a couple millimeters wider and taller than the previous S7 models. So the screens are way bigger, but hopefully shouldn't be a problem to hold. Then again, I can definitely see it still being difficult to reach the top of the screen with one hand because the screen is a lot taller. The other really cool thing about the screen is that they have an invisible home button, which is embedded right below the bottom of the screen, so they didn't have to put it in the bezel itself. And by the way they presented it, it doesn't seem to just be a software button, but it seems like there's actually some hardware for it. So it could be really cool to see how this works in reality, if there's some haptic feedback. I think it's pretty exciting. The other major difference between the two models is the battery. The S8 has a 3000 milliamp hour battery, while the S8 Plus has 3500. Now these aren't amazing, but they're pretty good, especially considering that both phones have the new Snapdragon 835 processor, which is supposedly much more energy efficient than previous processors, so I could see these phones lasting a while. I personally have the Pixel XL, which has a 3450 milliamp hour battery, and it has awesome battery life. So if the S8 and S8 Plus can match or even exceed the Pixel phone's life, I would be very happy. One of the other neat features was the camera's multi-frame processing. Now with this, when you go to take a picture, it actually takes multiple frames instead of one. Then it chooses the sharpest and best one of them. And it uses the image data from the others to reduce motion blur, improve low light quality, and just make the picture look better overall. This really excites me because it's very similar to how the camera on the Pixel phone works, which also uses multiple samples. If you had seen my Pixel phone review, you know that I said that that camera was easily the best camera on a smartphone I had seen because of how well it processed the images using those multiple samples. It had amazing low light quality. So if the Galaxy S8 is able to do the same thing, the camera should be able to take some outstanding photos. We'll have to see. Also, just looking at the paper specs for the camera are pretty good. Both phones have a 12 megapixel main camera and an 8 megapixel front camera. So it definitely seems like they're going for better image quality over just the pure number of megapixels, because the less megapixels, the bigger you can make those pixels, better image quality because they can take in more light. Another small but important feature is Bluetooth 5.0. They didn't really talk about this in the press conference, but it is listed in the specs. This is one of the first phones to have it, even though there aren't really many actual things that use it. But for those that do, it can improve Bluetooth range by up to like 4 times and potentially double the speed, so that's pretty cool. The final big feature they talked about was the Bixby assistant. Yes, another AI assistant, as if we did not have enough of those. And for the most part, to be honest, this one seems kind of generic, but it does claim to have a couple features that would be cool, assuming they work as well as they say. For example, it can apparently recognize things you point the camera at, such as a location or an object. If you point the camera at a famous landmark or something, it can provide info on it. And if you point it at something you want to buy, it will search their retail partners to see if it's on sale. This all sounds very nice in theory, but I'm not really holding my breath on how well it works or the practical usefulness of it, especially when Google already has their assistant that seems to work fine already. Though, interestingly, they did put a dedicated Bixby button on the side of the phone, so it really looks like they want to push this as something you'd use a lot, I guess. Most of the other features weren't really new or exciting in my opinion. I mean, it has water resistance, IP68, and wireless charging, which are both great, but that's to be expected at this point. And it does have 64 gigabytes of memory with expandable storage, 4 gigabytes of RAM. Again, those are good, but anything less would have just been disappointing. And also it ships with Android 7.0, which definitely is disappointing. Not sure why they wouldn't ship it with the latest 7.1. Kind of a dumb move if you ask me. One other thing they demoed is the Samsung DeX, which allows you to basically use the phone with a desktop interface. They kind of showed someone using PowerPoint, writing emails, that sort of thing, just plugging it in, using a mouse and keyboard. So that might be kind of useful to some people. I probably wouldn't use it myself. The rest of the stuff they talked about was kind of meh. I mean, they announced a new motion sensing VR controller for the Gear VR, as well as a bunch of VR content they're making, but it seems like they're just using the regular 60 Hz refresh rate for VR that they've used for a while, which I think is unacceptable for virtual reality, really. I mean, proper VR really needs to have at least 90 Hz refresh rate. Anything less is gonna make a lot of people nauseous, especially after long periods of time. So I'm definitely not excited about any of these VR features at all. They also showed off their new Gear 360 camera. It's a new version that is much smaller, handheld, and can do 4K video. I mean, it's kind of neat for some people maybe, but I don't really see many people actually using this thing to make 360 videos. So I think it's pretty pointless. Feels more like a gimmick to me. I mean, how many people do you really see wanting to make 360 videos? Not many. And the final noteworthy feature they had was a set of security options for logging into the phone. There's a few different ways. You can use a fingerprint or password, obviously, but they'll also allow for facial recognition and iris scanning. As for the fingerprint scanner, it's really located in a stupid spot, but let's just ignore that for now. The iris and facial scanning are interesting, but I'm definitely very skeptical about that. I would probably not use the facial scanning. I imagine it could be very easily defeated, maybe with like a picture or video of yourself. I don't know. Probably not secure at all, but I mean, we can give it the benefit of the doubt until we see it in action. Iris scanning, maybe, but if it's just using the front-facing camera, I'm not sure it has enough resolution to really uniquely identify your eye. I mean, you'd have to get really close. So I think these are pretty much just a gimmick. I could be wrong, we'll have to see. So what's the final verdict on the S8 and S8 Plus? Well, obviously without actually having my hands on it or using it for a while, I'm not going to draw any definitive conclusions. But for the most part, I think that this phone definitely has a lot of really cool features, specifically the infinity display and the camera. Those are really neat. For everything else though, seems there's really nothing truly revolutionary. They're more or less just incremental upgrades. That being said, I don't think there's much more you could even expect. I've said it before, but we've kind of reached a plateau with smartphones where unless someone comes up with something completely new and different, there's not much more you can add to the phone except minor upgrades from the previous year. I mean, really, where do we go from here? A slightly bigger camera, a bigger screen, as if they're not big enough, slightly better processor, 10% better, whatever. All these new features are cool, but there's not really anything that would fundamentally change how you use your phone. So depending on the price, which looks to be between $700 to $800, I think a lot of people are gonna do the math and decide it's probably not worth it. But I would like to know what you guys think about this. Are there any features that you're really excited about and you just need to upgrade? Or do you think your phone is just fine, you don't really care about it? We can talk about that down in the comments section. If you want to keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here. You can just click on those. And if you want to subscribe, I make new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Should be worth it. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. And as usual, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.